this? Looks pretty nice, huh? You maybe want to like learn how to build one? Oh, you do? Perfect. Let's do this. What's going on, guys? I'm Brian, and today I'm going to show you guys how to build your first PC. For this video, a PC that'll cost you about $600 and will be able to smash 1080p max settings at 60 FPS in most modern games. Edit videos just like this video you're watching right now, and even stream if that's something that you want to get into. Now, before we get started, be sure to check out the description box below for all the parts that you're gonna need for this build. I have chosen, as usual, to not include tax and shipping because, well, that, you know, it varies from place to place. Also, don't forget to like this video if you end up enjoying it and subscribe for more content just like this. All right, so this is a two-part full guide for you guys on how to build a PC. In this video, we're gonna go over the tools, components, and then show you guys how to actually assemble the PC. And then in part two, we will show you guys how to install the Windows, the drivers, also go over some benchmarks, and then I do have bonus tips for you guys for that video as well. All right, on to the tools. There are really going to only be two tools that you will absolutely 100% need to build your PC. The first one is gonna be your handy dandy notebook. Wait, I don't think that's right. No, it definitely not right. Oh, that's right. It's gonna be a screwdriver. More particularly, it's gonna be a Phillips screwdriver, and I like having two around. Why do I like to have two? Well, I like to have a standard one like this. This is great for installing your CPU cooler. This is great for installing your fans. But then I also like to have a smaller one around. This is great for installing motherboard screws. This is also great for installing your SSD to your SSD tray and other things that you need to have, like kind of like a smaller footprint, you know, tighter area to get into. The second tool that you're going to need is an 8 gig or larger flash drive. And this is in order to put the Windows 10 installation tool on here so you can actually install Windows 10. If you want to know how to do that, check up right up here. I will leave a card that kind of links you guys to my video I did on it to show you how to actually install Windows 10 on it. And I think it goes without saying that you're gonna need a second computer and an internet connection as well in order to set up this flash drive. Now, along with these two tools, the screwdriver and the thumb drive, there are a couple tools that I do recommend builders have, but they aren't needed. So if you don't have them or you don't want to get them, you know, I totally get it. The first one's gonna be a knife of some sort. This is more so just to open boxes. It's nice to have a knife around or something that you can use to open boxes. So have something that can open boxes. The second is going to be, it's over here, sorry. It's gonna be some zip ties. This is gonna really help make your system nice and neat. The third is gonna be a pair of wire clippers. This is to trim the excess zip ties. And then the last is gonna be some thermal paste or a thermal pad if you decide you wanna be fancy and that you can't deal with that, you know, stock thermal paste. Ew. Quick note on that last one, the stock thermal paste does work absolutely fine, so yeah, you don't need different thermal paste. Just throwing that out there. Okay, so when it comes to the components, I have a few parts that I personally will be swapping in for the video just because I had them readily available in my house. These components will not at all impact the performance. So the benchmarks that you'll see today in this video will reflect the performance that you should be getting if you decide to go down in the description box and grab the same parts that I have in my PC part picker list. So starting with the CPU, I chose the Ryzen 5 1600AF, and I talked a lot about this chip. This is undoubtedly the best budget CPU on the market, hands down. You can't beat it. It's gonna cost you between $85 and $100 depending on the day, and it's made on that 12 nanometer Zen Plus process. So it's basically like it might be called a 1600, but it's basically a Ryzen 5 2600 in spirit. Just a smidge slower, but for the price, killer. Moving on to the motherboard, I chose the B450 Tomahawk Max from MSI. If you've watched this channel before, you probably already know that this is definitely my favorite B450 board because it's affordable and it packs an incredible punch with its really overpowered VRM, at least for like the price of the actual board. Not only can it handle the 1600 AF no problem, it can also manage all the way up to the 16 core 3950X without an issue as well. So down the road, if you want to upgrade to a chip like that, you definitely can. It's great for now, and it's also great for later. The memory kit I have is a 16 gig kit from HyperX. It's 3200 megahertz speed, and it is perfect for this build. The build list memory kit will vary depending on what is cheapest. I have a parametric filter in the parts list. Just make sure that you're getting a 16 gig 2x kit at between 3000 and 3600 speed, and you should basically see the same performance that I do in my benchmarks. Storage is pretty simple for this build. What we are looking at is a 500 gigabyte SSD. I have a parametric filter to select the cheapest one for you guys that are on, whatever's on sale. Just make sure that you're going in, you're reading the reviews to ensure the SSD that you get is not junk. For the actual build and showing you guys how to build, I'm actually just going to be using this 850 Evo from Samsung. It was from my main build. I had it left over, so I'll be using it today just to show you guys how to put together your PC. As for our GPU, we will be going with the RX 570. I have an MSI version that will work perfectly fine. I would say for this price point at like the $500 to $600 price range, I would recommend, if you don't mind buying used, I would definitely recommend looking at hardware swap. You can find the 570 for about $80, and I think that's a lot better of a deal for this type of card than the $120 that you will spend if you go out and get a brand new one. Again, I've used hardware swap, I've had no issues, and I did also account for a brand new one in the parts list. So if you don't want to buy used, it is accounting for a brand new. But if you do want to buy used, you'll save 40 bucks, which is pretty sweet. Now, the power supply I threw into the parts list was the EVGA BQ 600 watt semi-modular unit. This is a high quality unit, and 600 watts is more than enough for this build as well as future upgrades. I personally will be using my Seasonic M12-2, I guess it's called, 620 watts Evo unit that I have that just lying around, so I'll be using that. But again, it's readily available. It's not going to affect, impact performance at all, so I'm okay with using what I have here. As for the case I have chosen, you guys probably can guess it from here if you've watched my previous videos, the Vontech P300A. This is a absolute dream to work in, and if you decide to like add RGB fans in the front, since the front panel is actually mesh, you get this really cool glow effect. It looks absolutely awesome, and you won't regret your decision. You can't get a case for 60 bucks or less with this many features in it. All right, so building a PC is less complicated than most think. It's just like Legos for big kids. What you want to start with is going to be your motherboard, your CPU, and your memory. Start off by removing the SATA data cables, the IO shield, and the motherboard manual from the motherboard, as well as the motherboard itself. Then take the motherboard out of its anti-static bag and place the motherboard on top of its box. It's now time to install your CPU. So take a look at your CPU, and you're gonna see this small golden triangle in the bottom left corner of it. This needs to line up with the little triangle and circle you'll find on your motherboard. Another quick way to figure out how the CPU will actually be inserted into the motherboard is by looking at the Ryzen actual name on the CPU. This needs to be parallel with this portion of the CPU socket. All right, so now that you know which way the CPU is installed, undo the latch on the socket and gently lower the CPU into the socket. It will fall right in, and you don't need to apply any pressure. After that's done, go ahead and lower the latch to its original location. Now, the next thing you want to do is prepare for installing the CPU cooler. In most cases, you will want to remove these black retainers, and in our case, we will as well. If you are using an aftermarket cooler, you will have to follow the instructions provided with that cooler. Now, as for the stock cooler, it will come with thermal paste pre-applied on the bottom, but if you have previously used the cooler or you're using an aftermarket cooler, you will want to make sure there is thermal paste or a thermal pad applied to your CPU. If you are applying thermal paste, you'll only need a little P or line for this CPU. So apply your thermal paste or a pad and then line up the screws on your stock cooler with the screw holes on the back plate. Start at one corner and just get the screw started. Then go diagonally across it and start the screw, and then finish up by starting the other 2 screws. You then can go ahead and tighten all 4 screws, but make sure you take the time to go crisscross while you actually tighten the screws. Now, after you have the cooler attached, go ahead and plug in the CPU fan connector into the CPU fan header. You can tuck away the excess cable around here. All right, so now that we have the CPU and CPU cooler installed, it's time to install the memory. When looking at your memory stick, you will want to line up this little slot on your memory stick with this little wall in the actual slot. There is only one way to install a memory stick, so don't worry about getting it wrong. It won't go in if you have it the wrong way. Now, when it comes to which slots to insert them in, you'll want to consult your manual, or some motherboards do have this little chart directly on the PCB. Once you know which slots to use, go ahead and undo the latches on each side of the slots, slide the memory stick into the slot and push down. You'll hear a little click and both latches will go up. Now that you have the memory installed, now would be a great time to install an M.2 drive if you have one. All you'll need to do is find the M.2 slot on your motherboard and insert it as so. Then go ahead and use this screw to screw it down into place. All right, so now we are ready to move on to getting the case prepared for the motherboard. So take your motherboard and move it off to the side for now. Grab your case and take off the front and side panels. Remove the little accessory box you'll have in the front tray. This will have some zip ties and a bunch of important screws. Feel free to spend a few minutes planning on how you want to route your cables throughout your case. I like to move the cables to roughly where they are going to need to be. Go ahead and grab your power supply. The EVGA BQ is a semi-modular power supply, and so you'll need to attach a few cables before installing your power supply into the actual case. For this build, we will need our 24-pin motherboard and 8-pin CPU power cables attached. If you have a semi-modular or non-modular power supply, these should actually already be attached. We then also need a power cable for our GPU, and we need one for our SATA SSD. If you have a secondary hard drive you plan on installing, you may need an additional SATA power cable due to the distance between the hard drive bay and where the SSD trays sit. Go ahead, plug all the cables we just mentioned into your power supply, and then install your power supply fan side down. You will attach the power supply to the case via these screws in these 4 spots on the back of your case. Now is a great time to move the power cables around to kind of where you'll need them. After you have the cables where you need them, go ahead and grab your IO shield, make sure it's in the right orientation, and snap it into the slot on the back of your case. You are now ready to install the motherboard. Before doing so, ensure your case has all required standoffs installed. Vontech does this for us in the P300A, so if you have this case and an ATX motherboard, don't worry about this step, you can move forward. If you have a micro ATX motherboard, make sure that there is enough standoffs for each of the standoff screw holes on the motherboard. All right, now go ahead and lower your motherboard carefully into the case. Be sure to align all of the standoff holes with the standoffs in the case. The P300A actually has this little lip on the middle standoff. This lip helps the motherboard kind of drop in when it's aligned properly. Now go ahead and use these screws to screw it in. The next thing you need to do is plug in the 24-pin motherboard power connector and the 8-pin CPU power connector. Then go ahead and plug in the USB 3.0 connector and front IO audio connector. The next part is to plug in the remaining front IO per this chart. You can find this chart oftentimes on the motherboard itself or in the motherboard manual if it's not on the board itself. After doing this, go ahead and plug in your SATA data cable into any of the SATA ports on the motherboard. We will use SATA port 3 because it's easier to use for cable management. Also keep in mind that on the Tomahawk, if you occupy the M.2 slot, ports 5 and 6 will be disabled. Be sure that you're checking your motherboard's manual to see if your motherboard does something similar when you install an M.2 drive. Now that we have all of that plugged in, go ahead and attach your SSD to the SSD tray with these screws. Plug it into the SATA power and SATA data cables. The last thing we need to do is install the GPU. Remove these two PCIe slot covers from your motherboard by loosening up and removing the thumb screws. Then line up the GPU with the slot and press it in. You should feel a slight click. Now go ahead and screw in the thumb screws that you removed in order to remove the PCIe slot covers. Finally, plug the power cable into the GPU, and we, my friends, are ready to boot this guy up. Well, almost. Go ahead and tidy up your cable management. Pop the front cover back on and put those side panels on too. Now we are ready to boot. All right, guys, so that's how to actually assemble your PC. The second part of this video should be out early next week, so keep an eye out for that. That video is gonna go over, like I said before, the Windows and drivers installation, benchmarks for the system, and then some bonus tips for when you have your system up and running. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. If you hated it, give me a thumbs down, but don't stop there. Let me know why in the comments below. I cannot fix the issues that I have in my videos if you don't tell me why, right? Also, check out my latest videos. It should be popping up right about, should be like right here. I think it pops up here, or does it pop up? It pops over here, doesn't it? Maybe it's over here. It'll pop up right here. And don't forget to subscribe for more tech content just like this. If you have any questions, let me know about those as well in the comments. Thanks for watching.